Hi, welcome to the multimedia edition of this month's Faculty Pointers. We'll spend the next 20 minutes or so talking about ways to use multimedia to enhance educational experiences. A great deal of scientific research has been conducted on the use of multimedia in education. This discussion will present a Cliff's Notes version of some of that research. And since you're a practicing educator, not an academic researcher, I'll stick to practical advice and leave the heavy theory to the academic journals. In the beginning, there was cave art, and it was good. As a species, we've been on this planet for about 50,000 years or so. Written words have only been around for about 10,000 years, so it's safe to say that our brains are wired for pictures more than they are for text. But let me reiterate, the use of multimedia has nothing to do with so-called learning styles. The fact is that we have 5 senses and we learn through all of them. It's not a matter of appealing to a student's preferred modality, it's about choosing the right tool for the job. There are times when text alone is the best method for conveying information. In other situations, drawings, photographs, videos, and sound clips are the most appropriate. Certain concepts can be enhanced by a hands-on tactile feel. And while taste and smell aren't often used in academia, unless you teach culinary arts, the palate and olfactory senses often produce the strongest memories. Cognitive science is the study of how people think and learn. Everything that I discussed today is strongly supported by scientific research. Let's start with a simple idea, and that's the idea of something called cognitive load. The brain has a limited amount of working memory that's used to hold information temporarily, and by temporarily I mean a few seconds, until it can be moved to long-term memory. Cognitive load is the combination of the processing power needed to learn a concept, plus the amount of new information that's held in working memory. Working memory is limited, so the more the student has to hold at one time, the greater the cognitive load. Here's a picture showing an example of a little diagram of cognitive load. Here the student is trying to remember one fact and one concept. It's not real difficult to process that information, and the new information is related to the student's prior knowledge, so the student is likely to learn the new material. And here we have a classic case of TMI, too much information. The student's working memory can't hold all these new facts at one time, so he's unable to process the information, and as you can see, the light bulb does not go on. So our job is to present information that reduces a student's cognitive load. Now, if this were an actual lesson, I'd stop here and give a little mini quiz on cognitive load. This is something I would post online. Okay, fill in the blank questions or multiple choice questions can be graded automatically. Students would need to answer each question or at least each section of questions successfully before moving on to the next question and the next concept. So let's see what you remember. Hopefully you know that cognitive load is the combination of processing power needed to learn a concept plus the information that's held in working memory. More new information means a greater cognitive load, and lower cognitive loads usually result in more learning. So let's look at some ways to reduce cognitive load. We tend to process information visually, so a simple diagram that explains a concept is often a good thing. There's a popular movement around the use of infographics. Now, not all infographics are well designed, but the scientific principle behind infographics is solid. So you might think, well, if a picture is good, then a moving picture is better. Well, sometimes it is, but not always. We'll talk about the differences. Every sandwich is too big to eat. Every significant concept is too big to learn. But if you break them down into manageable pieces, they can be digested. And instead of one big summative assessment at the end of a chapter, it's better to have a lot of small formative assessments to go with every concept. And we'll talk about some easy ways to incorporate these into your lessons. And this will be true whether it's an online lesson, a face-to-face lesson, a hybrid course. The principles are universal. So let's start by looking at some examples of concepts related to graphics and diagrams. Simple line drawings are really better than detailed drawings or photographs. They have smaller amounts of information, and less information means what? A lower cognitive load. Instead of overloading the picture with bright colors and bold fonts, too much, you just want to use a bright color or a bold font to focus attention on one particular item. And it's a good idea if you have pictures to just label them, but label them with keywords only, no complete sentences along with the picture. And if you need a text description to describe the picture, something very brief, a very short text description, and it should be adjacent to the picture, right next to it, not on a different page. And if you want to just add some decorative pictures to make your slide look cute, don't. They tend to be distracting. So if I were explaining why we have the seasons on the Earth, I'd start by showing a picture of the Earth in orbit around the Sun. Not to scale, of course. This is a simple picture. It shows the tilt of the Earth. Okay, it shows the northern and southern hemispheres. It shows that the Earth is tilted, and it shows the Earth in two places around the Sun in its orbit. Now I would go into some detail here. So I don't have a lot of detail in here. I've got the two continents so that you can see the northern and southern hemisphere. I have the equator so that you can see that the Earth is tilted. And notice that I'm using color, but the only color I'm using is to represent sunlight because that's really all that's relevant in this picture. So as you can see in the northern hemisphere, 2/3 of the northern hemisphere is bathed in sunlight and only 1/3 is shaded in darkness. So I have lots of sun in the north. That's why it's summer in June. However, in the southern hemisphere, you can see 2/3 of it is shaded in darkness and only 1/3 has sunlight coming to it. So because there's not a lot of sun in the southern hemisphere, it's winter in the south. So this is a fairly simple picture. It uses color to represent sunlight because that's really what's important. That's why we have the seasons. Okay, flip it around to December, 6 months later, when the Earth is on the other side of the sun, and in this time the southern hemisphere is pointed towards the sun. So we have 2/3 of the southern hemisphere bathed in sunlight. That's why it's summer down there. And we have 2/3 of the northern hemisphere in darkness and only 1/3 in sunlight. That's why it's cold up here. Still images are usually better than animations, especially when you're explaining a concept. So, such as how something works. Okay, a still image, you can show movement if you want to with arrows, or in this case you can see that I'm showing the movement of the fact and the concept through working memory. I'm actually implying that it moves down using gravity. Okay, this looks like a funnel. Your brain is kind of realizing that these two things are going to go down here and get ground into the gears. Okay, you can see prior knowledge, there's an arrow pointing in there, and you can see comprehension is what's lighting the light bulb. Okay, now I could show this with the facts and concepts, kind of moving through, and I could show these gears turning, and that might look a lot cooler, but actually that would cause the brain to kind of overload with information. Okay, animations and videos force the brain to remember all the frames of motion, which is an increase in cognitive load. And animations and videos also encourage passive learning. So by using the still image, the student has to actually process the information, has to think about, how things are moving through this process, and that's causing them to be much more active. Animations and videos, on the other hand, they're good for explaining procedures. So for example, if I wanted to demonstrate the proper use of lab equipment, I might have a video showing a person using that lab equipment. Okay. Likewise, if you're showing how to use a piece of software, a screencast is a good idea to show how to use certain software. So let's see what you remember about this. So to explain a concept, do we want a detailed photograph or a simple line drawing? Okay, remember a simple line drawing has less information, only highlights the important parts, and that's usually better because it reduces the student's cognitive load. To focus attention on an item, bright colors and bold fonts. And if you're going to label items on a picture, complete sentences only? No, keywords only. And for explaining concepts, is it better to use still images or videos? To explain a concept, still images usually do a better job. And on the other hand, videos are better for explaining procedures. Remember that the brain has a limited amount of working memory, and that's used to hold information temporarily until it can be moved to long-term memory. Cognitive load is the combination of processing power needed to learn a concept, plus the amount of new information that's held in working memory, or short-term memory. Working memory is limited, so the more the student has to hold at one time, the greater the cognitive load. That's why we try to put things into smaller chunks. So here's one way to describe the parts of a computer. This is something you might read in a textbook or, God forbid, on a PowerPoint slide. Go ahead and read it and see what you can make out of that. Okay, unless you already knew that, you're probably going, huh? Okay, you experienced cognitive overload. There are a whole bunch of facts presented in that, not a lot of context, and just way too much information. So that lesson needs to be broken up into multiple parts. So here's how I would do this. I would do this with a visual representation showing what the parts of a computer do. Now, there were three main concepts in that description. There's the processor, the hard drive, and the memory. And they're all interrelated, so I want to address them one at a time, but I also want to show the relationship between the parts. Okay, so here's what I would do. In class, I'd describe each part while this slide is showing, and I would introduce the parts one at a time. So let's start with the hard drive. Well, what's on the hard drive? Well, if we look at this, we can see we've got, our operating system, our productivity software, some games. So you can see that there are programs on the hard drive. Okay, there's other things on the hard drive too, and that is data files. So here's a Word document, here's a photograph, here's a PowerPoint slide. Not only is it a PowerPoint slide, it's this PowerPoint slide. So three distinct, I'll get to the other concepts. So let's go to working memory, okay, or just the computer's memory. The computer's memory relates to the hard drive, so you can see an arrow showing that the two of them communicate with each other. Now, I wanted you to see that the memory and the hard drive are related to each other, but I want you to focus on memory here. So I kind of grayed out the hard drive. So it's sort of washed out, you can sort of see it, but your attention is focused here. So what do you see in memory right now? Well, I see a PowerPoint slide. So that means that the PowerPoint program must be in memory right now, and the file that I'm currently working on. So in contrast, you can see the hard drive has all the programs that are on the computer and all the data files, where memory is only holding one program and one data file. Okay, that's a little bit of an oversimplification, but it's pretty close. The stuff currently in use is in memory. So again, I gray that out, and I focus again on the processor over here. What's the processor doing? Well, it works with memory. And what is it doing? It's displaying the slide. So the processor processes the information that's in memory. And then I'm going to show the big picture with all the pieces here. So we can see the hard drive has all the programs and data. Memory has just the program and data currently in use. And the processor is processing what is currently in memory. So even though there are three distinct concepts on this slide, the parts are interrelated, so I cover them on the same slide. But I highlight one at a time so the students aren't overwhelmed with all that information. Now, let's take a look at quizzes or homework or assessments and different ways that we used to do this. Well, the old way, and maybe you're still doing this, so maybe I can convince you to not do it the old way anymore. Well, the old way is you read a chapter, you do the end of chapter problems, you wait at least a week for grades, and then either you're happy with your grade or you're not happy with your grade. So you might smile, you might grumble, but chances are next week you're going to forget everything. Well, we have the technology. We can make it better than it was. What I like to do now is I assign a quiz first. I assign an online homework assignment. You can call it a quiz, a homework assignment, it doesn't really matter. And then I provide suggested resources. So here's a chapter of the textbook that you might want to use. Here's some web pages. Each question covers one concept. Now think about this. In real life, if I'm trying to learn how to use a piece of software or a piece of equipment, I'm not going to read the entire owner's manual from start to finish. I'm going to say, here's what I need to do. Let me look up the procedure for just that part. Well, that's pretty much what students do. They're not reading the whole chapter. They're going right to the homework and they're saying, what do I need to know to answer this particular question? So if you want them to read the whole chapter, you better assign questions on all the concepts. So I just tell them right off the bat, here's a homework assignment. Okay, here are some resources that you can use to find the answers to this. Now, what I do is for every question, I have them read the appropriate part of the chapter or whatever is assigned. It might be a podcast or something like that. And then I have one little mini quiz with immediate feedback, so it's automatically graded. So I only have to create it. I don't have to actually do the grading part of it. And here's the funny thing. I allow students to retake it as many times as they need to. And I don't allow them to continue to the next concept until they get at least a passing grade on the mini quiz. Okay, now these are low points, low stakes testing, so there's not a lot of points attached to it, but they really do have to do it. It's enough to affect their grade, but not so much that it kills them if they don't get it right. And again, like I said, I allow them to retake it over and over again. So needless to say, it doesn't just give them the right answer if they get it wrong. It just says, you got that one wrong, try it again. Okay, now multiple choice, of course, they can just keep guessing, but I try to do some short answer and some other things in there as well. So it's interactive, it gives immediate feedback to the students, and it assures that the students are learning new information before they proceed to, it assures that they learn information before they proceed to the next concept. Now, if your content is not online, you can still incorporate formative assessments in the classroom. All you have to do is ask a question and have the student write their answer on paper. Okay, so you can do this during a lecture. And you can, there's a number of ways. If you really like technology, you can think about using clickers. But with or without technology, you can use small group discussions and include those into the formative assessments. So one thing you might do is pose a question, have the students write it down silently on paper, and maybe have them get together with a partner or 2 or 3 people and have them discuss their answers, and then have 1 or 2 groups share their answers with the rest of the class. See if everybody's understanding things, and if they do, then you move on. If not, you've got to cover some more material. Okay, so this can be done online, it can be done face-to-face, but the idea behind formative assessment is that it's required, but it's low stakes. You don't want to punish the students for not getting concept. You're really just trying to find out where they stand and let them know where they stand. So let's talk about how to use audio. Now, in an online course or during a lecture, providing audio along with pictures enhances the learning. So the combination of voice and pictures provides 2 channels to get information into the brain, and that increases the probability that the students will learn it. Cognitive scientists refer to this as the Modality Principal. But it has to be pictures and voice, not text and voice. Okay, here's why. Reading to yourself is faster than reading out loud. So if a student is reading something on screen to himself and I'm reading it out loud to him, okay, my voice is not synchronized with the student's eyes. So they're 3 or 4 words ahead of my voice. That means my voice is now a distraction. So it's a good idea to combine pictures because the pictures are processed by one part of the brain. The audio is processed by a different part of the brain. The likelihood that it's going to be remembered is now doubled. In online or face-to-face courses, and this is established by prior research, students who received audio feedback on assignments, their learning was improved and they ended up with a deeper understanding of the course content. Okay, part of that is because vocal inflections provide more information than just printed words. I know when I was working on my dissertation, when I would send a draft to my chairs, my committee, and they would send me feedback in writing, first of all, it seemed kind of harsh as I was reading it, and it wasn't very informative because I'm sure they were typing fast and they had a lot to do. But when we had voice conferences, phone conferences, I found their voices to be a lot more supportive. So where the text feedback was kind of harsh and cold, the voice feedback was much more supportive and much more friendly, and I got a better feeling out of it. And I also got more information because it takes them less time to talk than it does to write. Okay, students who received audio feedback on assignments were more likely to use that feedback and enhance their final project. So for example, if you have students doing drafts of a paper, if you provide them with audio feedback on the drafts instead of written feedback, they're more likely to use that to produce a better paper later. Okay, and instructors actually spend less time creating audio feedback than creating the equivalent text-based feedback. So it takes you less time to talk to the student, even if it's a recording, than it does to type. Okay, But in studies, students actually spent the same amount of time listening to the feedback as they did reading the text feedback. So it's the same amount of time for the students, it's less time for the instructor. Okay, so to me, that's 4 benefits for the price of 1. And would you like some frosting on that quadruple chocolate cake? The Canvas Learning Management System allows you to easily add audio or video to a Canvas page or while you're grading student work. All you have to do is click and talk. Now that's music to my ears. So let's see what you know about this topic. So what works well with voice? Pictures. And that's referred to as the Modality Principal. So if you want to enhance student learning and give them a deeper understanding on course content, providing audio feedback on their assignments is very helpful. And it actually, even though it's more helpful, it takes us less time to do. That's a win-win. So, thanks for watching the multimedia edition of this month's Faculty Pointers. I hope you found it useful and enlightening. If you need help with graphics, sound recording, PowerPoint, or creating any kind of instructional material, please contact me through Eagle or Outlook Mail. And if you like this multimedia version of Faculty Pointers, please send me some feedback, written or audio. If you keep listening, I'll keep recording. Bye.